Welcome to 28storms.com. This is your tropical weather update for the Atlantic Basin and Eastern Pacific on this Thursday, June 16th. The Atlantic is all clear today, but we'll take a look at some model guidance to see if that's going to change in the coming week. And as we already know, the Eastern Pacific is about to take off once again. We're about to get our second named storm of the year in all likelihood. The name would be Beatrice if this became a tropical storm. The National Hurricane Center is still highlighting the area to the southeast of the Gulf of Tehuantepec, and they have increased the probabilities of development within 48 hours to 40%, and that looks fairly good to me. This was the early morning surface plot from the Tropical Analysis Forecast branch. The Atlantic is pretty void of any significant weather, but we do have a pretty large tropical wave now passing over the central Caribbean Sea near Hispaniola. There's also another weak wave out in the central Atlantic near 40 degrees west, but it's fairly weak. And here we go with a 1008 millibar stationary low located along the monsoon trough. As you can see, really nothing out there in the Atlantic today. There's that very weak tropical wave now beginning to pass over Haiti, heading west toward Jamaica and Central America. This could be somewhat of a player down the road towards the southwest Gulf of Mexico, but there's going to be even more low-level energy coming in behind that one. And more importantly, in the short term, this is where our more immediate development is going to occur out here in the Eastern Pacific, so we'll take a closer look over there. And just to show you, these are the upper levels, and we're not expecting much from this tropical wave over the Caribbean. It's very hostile, it's very dry, and there is a lot of wind shear at the current time. The Eastern Pacific remains to be a completely different story. We have this stalled-out monsoon trough generating numerous convection for several hundred miles now, and we're beginning to see a more organized area of low pressure near 91 degrees west and 10 degrees north latitude. There's still really not a large concentration of convection right over the center, but it won't take long. As we already see, there's convection in all directions of this low pressure area, and over the next 48 hours it's going to really come together. And here's just a quick look at the enhanced infrared, and this is the latest water vapor imagery. As always, there continues to be a very large abundance of moisture embedded within the monsoon trough, and notice how there really isn't a whole lot of wind shear appearing on this satellite. You don't see much in the way of convection being blown off in either direction. If anything, there is some very light easterly wind shear to the south of an upper level ridge that's now positioning itself over the Mexican Riviera. Here is a look at those upper level winds, and as you can see, that upper level ridge is very strong, but it's a little bit more toward the northwest. That's leaving some room for this tropical disturbance to be sheared ever so slightly by some easterly winds, but they're really not that strong. If anything, they're 5 to 10 knots at the most. So overall, the pattern is already there, and it's supportive of tropical development in the short term. This is just another look at the upper level conditions. This is the position of your upper level ridge. As you can see, all the troughs to the north are riding up and over this ridge, so this storm is being protected from any westerly winds or significant westerlies. And as you can see, denoted by the blue colors, there's really no wind shear in this area. Here is the latest precipitable water analysis, and as you can see, toward the end of this frame, we're really beginning to see more cyclonic rotation around 91 degrees west and 10 degrees north, and that's going to become even more, it's going to stand out even more over the next 2 to 3 days. We've alluded to this over the last 48 hours as well. The positive phase of the Madden-Julian oscillation is now beginning to move into the Eastern Pacific, and this is allowing for more upward motion and surface convergence once again at the surface, which allows more surface low pressure to develop. So this is a fairly favorable pattern all the way around for the Eastern Pacific over the next week. This is the latest 12Z GFS. This is sea level pressure. As we can see, it's quickly developing our storm, and it's developing this into at least a tropical storm within the next 5 days. Notice how during the first 5 days it keeps it well south of Mexico, but it does show more of a turn toward the north while it begins to weaken between days 5 and 7. So that's a potential scenario. And the latest 12Z Canadian model develops the storm within 48 to 72 hours. It develops it a little bit more robustly, and it also keeps the storm a bit more off the coast of Mexico compared to the GFS forecast model. Now this is the latest 12Z ECMWF forecast. This is for Saturday morning. Here's our organizing 1007 millibar surface low. By Sunday, it's now beginning to intensify into what is more than likely a tropical depression. And by Monday morning, this is becoming better defined, more than likely making a run at tropical storm status. By Tuesday, it's making a bit more of a turn toward the north, and it's now approaching the Mexican coastline, One thing that is positive based on this run is that it's not all that intense. We're not talking about anything close to a major hurricane. In fact, this is more than likely a tropical storm compared to being a hurricane. And the more than likely reason why the model is turning this more toward the north is that if I rewind this model a little bit, notice how we start off with a lot of mid-level ridging over much of central Mexico, the Gulf Coast, and into the southern United States. And over time, over 72 to 96 hours, we begin to see more troughiness begin to set up over the central plains. And by day 5, we really have a lot of troughiness over the central United States, which has allowed that subtropical ridge to get shunted off more toward the east, thus allowing some wiggle room for the storm to begin moving north. Here's the latest water vapor imagery of Mexico and the United States. And again, this is the current time. We have mid-level ridging, more than entrenched across much of northern Mexico and the southwest United States. To the northwest, we have a long-wave trough over the Pacific Northwest of the U.S., and it looks like over the next 5 days, some of the models are bringing in some more shortwave energy from across the northern Pacific, and they're funneling this into this long-wave trough, and it's going to act to intensify the trough a little bit more, thus the reason why they show this mid-level ridge being blown off toward the east by this trough that's now trying to come in more into the west coast of the United States. So to sum up our expectations, we do expect this disorganized area to develop into Tropical Storm Beatrice over the next 72 hours. It will more than likely be somewhere in this general area sometime this weekend, and there's a lot of tricky things that we have to solve over the coming days. Again, some of the models take it more out to sea, while some of the models like the GFS and European try to show more of a northerly turn into the Mexican Riviera. And interests along this part of the Mexican coastline are going to want to keep a close watch on things, as there is a chance that we could have a tropical depression or tropical storm impact along the Mexican coastline sometime around Monday, give or take about 24 hours. Either way, it's not going to be that far off the coast if it does stay off the coast altogether. Now, if we go back to the European model for just one moment, I do want to bring your attention to what some of the models are now showing in the southwest Gulf of Mexico, and also keep an eye on what's coming out of the southwest Caribbean and Central America over the next 72 hours. This is now Friday morning, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Notice how all of a sudden we have a little bit more low-level energy now streaming into the southwest Gulf and Bay of Campeche. And by day 5, now this is Tuesday morning, it's trying to develop a weak area of low pressure right off the Mexican coastline. And if it does have enough area over water, it may be something to watch, because some models show an increase in upper level ridging, whereas some others keep it more off toward the eastern Pacific. So there's a lot of model disagreement at the moment. It's really hard to tell what's going to occur, but the bottom line is the southwest Gulf of Mexico could be an area to watch as we see this model begin to strengthen things further by day 6. This is now midweek next week, so that'll be the next area to keep an eye on for interest in the Atlantic Basin. This is the same solution that the GFS has been showing for the last several days. This is now Tropical Storm Beatrice in all likelihood. This is the 102-hour GFS forecast. And as we set this into motion, you really see that once Beatrice begins to weaken, it tries to develop a second area of low pressure over the southwest Gulf of Mexico. But just to prove to you that there are two sides to every story, this is the Canadian CMC shear forecast for the next 6 to 7 days. And notice how it keeps the mid-level ridge over much of Mexico and the eastern Pacific, while it continues to funnel in a lot of northwest wind shear. So obviously the GFS and European are painting a favorable upper level ridge over the Gulf, while the Canadian model is keeping things rather hostile for any type of tropical development. So we will more than likely be monitoring Beatrice throughout the weekend, and then as far as any southwest Gulf activity is concerned, that's still really far down the road, at least 6 days out. And as of right now, I'm really not a strong believer in anything happening down there just yet, but at the same time, I do acknowledge the possibility that this could be an area to watch. So we'll just keep things monitored over here at 28storms.com, and we'll be sure to update you as things progress. So thanks again for checking us out, and we'll have another video by tomorrow.